I need someone who fits my future, Clara, not someone who reminds me of where I came from, he sneered, adjusting his silk tie, a tie she had worked double shifts to buy him. Outside, the Seattle rain hammered against the glass, mirroring the storm about to tear Clara's life apart. She was 28, drowning in debt, and about to be homeless. But as Liam walked out of that diner and into the arms of another woman, he made the biggest miscalculation in financial history. He didn't know that the woman he just discarded was the sole heiress to the largest private real estate portfolio in North America. And by the time he found out, it would be too late to say sorry. The fluorescent lights of the Rusty Spoon diner buzzed with an irritating hum that usually gave Clara Mitchell a headache by the end of her 10-hour shift. Today, however, she couldn't hear it. She couldn't hear the clatter of silverware, the sizzling of grease from the kitchen, or the grumbling of the regulars. All she could hear was the blood rushing in her ears. Sitting in booth 4, the one with the torn red vinyl seat, was her husband of 5 years, Liam Bennett. He wasn't wearing his usual worn-out flannel. He was wearing a charcoal grey suit, tailored and sharp. Sitting next to him wasn't his brother or a friend, but a woman Clara recognized instantly, Chloe St. James. Chloe was the daughter of the city's most aggressive real estate developer. She was beautiful, polished, and looked at Clara with the kind of pity one reserves for a stray dog. "Sign it, Clara," Liam said, his voice devoid of the warmth it used to hold. He slid a thick envelope across the table. Clara's hands, red and chapped from scrubbing dishes, trembled as she reached for the papers. "Liam, we talked about this. We said we'd weather the storm. I just picked up extra shifts at the warehouse. I can pay for your certification exams next month." Liam let out a short, cruel laugh. He glanced at Chloe, who smirked and checked her gold Rolex. "There is no we anymore, Clara," Liam said, leaning in. "Look at you. You smell like stale coffee and desperation. I'm moving up in the world. Chloe's father has offered me a junior partnership at St. James Development. I can't walk into those boardrooms with a wife who waits tables and shops at Goodwill." The cruelty of his words felt like a physical slap. Clara felt tears pricking her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I supported you for 5 years, Liam. When you lost your job at the firm, who paid the rent? When you needed a car, who took the bus so you could drive?" "That's ancient history," Liam snapped, his patience thinning. "You were a stepping stone, Clara. A placeholder. Now sign the papers. I'm generous. I'm letting you keep the debt on the credit cards, since most of it was for household expenses anyway." "Generous," Clara whispered, staring at the document. It was an uncontested divorce filing. He wanted everything severed immediately. No alimony, no division of assets, not that they had any. Just a clean break so he could marry into the St. James dynasty. "I need this done today," Chloe spoke for the first time, her voice like crushed velvet. "We have a gala at the Metropolitan Club tonight. Liam needs to be a free man." Clara looked at Liam one last time, searching for a trace of the man she had married, the man who had promised her the world when they were both broke college students. That man was dead. In his place sat a stranger, blinded by ambition. With a shaky hand, Clara picked up a cheap ballpoint pen from her apron pocket. She signed her name. Clara Mitchell. "Good," Liam said, snatching the papers back instantly. He stood up, not even looking at her. "Pack your things. I want the apartment cleared by tomorrow. The lease is in my name, and I'm breaking it." "Liam, I have nowhere to go," Clara pleaded, panic finally setting in. "It's mid-November." "Not my problem," he muttered. He took Chloe's arm, and together they walked out of the diner, leaving Clara alone in the booth. The manager, a gruff man named Rick, walked over. "Clara, if you're gonna cry, do it in the back. Customers are staring." "I'm not crying, Rick," Clara said, her voice stealing as she stood up. She untied her apron and threw it on the table. "And I'm not working. I quit." She walked out into the cold Seattle rain, homeless, husbandless, and penniless. She had $42 in her bank account and a maxed-out credit card. She walked for hours, the cold seeping into her bones, until she found herself sitting on a bench in a small park near the waterfront, watching the grey waves crash against the pier. She checked her phone. A notification from her banking app popped up. Overdraft fee applied. $35. That's also was. She laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "Well," she whispered to the empty air, "it can't get any worse." She was wrong. It was about to get much, much stranger. Clara spent that night in a 24-hour laundromat, pretending to wash the same load of clothes over and over again, just to stay warm. By morning, she was exhausted, hungry, and her spirit was fractured. She was sitting in a public library, using the free Wi-Fi to search for women's shelters, when a man in a pristine black suit approached her table. He looked out of place among the dusty bookshelves and homeless patrons sleeping in chairs. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses that looked more expensive than Clara's entire life history. "Mrs. Bennet?" the man asked softly. Clara looked up, startled. "It's Mitchell. Clara Mitchell. And if you're a debt collector, you're wasting your time. You can't get blood from a stone." The man smiled gently. It wasn't a predatory smile. It was professional, almost reverent. "I'm not a debt collector, Miss Mitchell. My name is Silas Sterling. I am the senior executor for the law firm Sterling, Cooper, and Weiss, based in New York." Clara frowned. "New York? I've never been to New York." "No, but your grandmother was," Silas said. He pulled out a chair. "May I?" Clara nodded slowly, her heart pounding. "My grandmother died before I was born. My mum said she was a seamstress. Your mother protected you from the truth, perhaps to give you a normal life, or perhaps because she was estranged from her own mother," Silas explained, opening a leather briefcase. He pulled out a file stamped with a wax seal. "Your grandmother was indeed a seamstress 50 years ago, but she was also a woman of incredible business acumen. Her name was Evelyn Caldwell." Clara stared at him blankly. Caldwell, like the Caldwell Trust? Even in her poverty, Clara knew the name. The Caldwell Trust owned half the skyline in Chicago, vast stretches of land in Montana, and premium commercial blocks in Manhattan. It was an empire of old money and quiet power. "Precisely," Silas said. "Evelyn Caldwell passed away 3 days ago. She had been watching you for years, Clara. She knew about your mother's passing. She knew about your struggle. And she knew about your husband." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. "She watched me struggle? She watched me eat instant noodles for dinner for 3 years and did nothing?" "It was a test," Silas said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Evelyn believed that wealth without character is a curse. She wanted to see if you would remain kind, hard-working, and loyal despite your hardships. She wanted to know if you were different from the people who usually surround the wealthy. People like Liam Bennett." Clara flinched at the name. "She had private investigators tracking you," Silas continued. "When Mr. Bennett served you divorce papers yesterday, a clause in Evelyn's will was triggered. Had you stayed married to him, the inheritance would have been placed in a trust until you were 50, to prevent him from accessing it. But since he has legally severed ties, Silas slid a document toward her. It wasn't a bill, it was a statement of assets. You are the sole beneficiary of the Caldwell estate, Clara. As of this morning, you are the owner of assets valued at approximately $1.3 billion, including liquid cash reserves of $80 million immediately available to you. The library spun. Clara gripped the edge of the table. This is a joke. Is this a prank show? Where are the cameras? This is very real, Miss Mitchell, Silas said, handing her a heavy black debit card. It was made of metal and had no numbers on it, just a chip and her name. This is your Centurion card. It is linked to your private holding account. I have a car waiting outside. We need to get you to the airport. The board of directors is waiting to meet you in New York. Clara looked at the card. Then she looked at her reflection in the library window, hair messy, wearing a thrift store coat. I can't go to New York, she stammered. I look like a mess. Silas stood up and buttoned his jacket. Ms. Mitchell, when you have $1 billion, you don't look like a mess. You look like you're setting a trend. However, if it makes you comfortable, we have a stylist waiting at the Four Seasons downtown to prepare you for the flight. Clara stood up. Her legs felt like jelly. Yesterday she had lost everything. Today, she owned everything. What about Liam? She asked, a sudden darkness entering her voice. Silas paused. A glint of steel appeared in his eyes. Mr. Bennett has made his choice. He chose a junior partnership at a local firm over the Empress of Real Estate. He is currently unaware of your change in circumstance. We can keep it that way for as long as you like, or... Silas tilted his head. We can make his realization painful. Clara thought about the rain. She thought about the way Liam had looked at her in the diner. She thought about Chloe's smirk. Don't tell him, Clara said, her voice firming up. Not yet. I want him to succeed. I want him to climb that ladder. I want him to get to the very top, thinking he's won. Silas raised an eyebrow. And then? Clara clenched the black card in her hand. And then, I want to be the one who owns the ladder. Silas smiled, a genuine shark-like grin. I think you're going to be an excellent chairwoman, Miss Mitchell. Shall we? They walked out of the library. A sleek, black Rolls-Royce Phantom was parked illegally at the curb, a police officer standing nearby. Instead of writing a ticket, the officer was chatting respectfully with the driver. As Clara approached, the driver opened the rear door. She slid into the butter-soft leather interior. It smelled of expensive cologne and opportunity. As the car pulled away, Clara watched the streets of Seattle pass by, the streets she had walked in the rain just hours ago. Where to first, Miss Mitchell? Silas asked from the seat across her. The Four Seasons, Clara said. And Silas, get me the best divorce lawyer in the country. I signed Liam's papers, but I want to make sure the door is sealed shut before I open the vault. Way ahead of you, Silas replied, tapping on a tablet. I've retained Harrison and Ford. They eat sharks for breakfast. Clara leaned back and closed her eyes. The nightmare was over. The game had just begun. The suite at the Four Seasons was larger than the entire apartment Clara had shared with Liam. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Elliott Bay, but Clara turned her back on the city. She sat in a velvet chair, facing a vanity mirror that reflected a woman she barely recognized. A team of 3 stylists, led by a sharp-tongued Frenchman named Henri, hovered around her. The hair, Henri declared, lifting a strand of Clara's limp, mouse-brown hair. It is sad. It apologizes for existing. We must change it. Do whatever you want, Clara said, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. Just make me look like someone who can't be hurt. 3 hours later, the woman in the mirror was a stranger. Her hair was now a rich, dark espresso, cut into a sharp, asymmetrical bob that framed her jawline like a blade. Her skin, previously dull from stress and poor diet, glowed under expert contouring. But it was the clothes that completed the illusion. She wore a cream-colored cashmere power suit by Armani, tailored within an inch of its life. On her feet were Christian Louboutin pumps, soled in red, like a warning. Silas Sterling entered the room, paused, and nodded with approval. "The board won't know what hit them. The jet is fueled, Miss Mitchell. We leave for New York in 20 minutes. On the private Gulfstream G650, Clara didn't sleep. Instead, she spent the 5-hour flight devouring the files Silas had provided. She memorized names, profit margins, debt ratios, and asset locations. She had spent 5 years managing a household on minimum wage. She knew how to budget. She realized quickly that a billion-dollar corporation wasn't so different from a household budget. It just had more zeros and less forgiveness. They landed in Teterboro and took a helicopter to Manhattan. The Caldwell Trust headquarters was a monolith of steel and glass on Park Avenue. The boardroom was freezing. A long mahogany table dominated the room, surrounded by 12 men and 1 woman, all of whom looked at Clara with thinly veiled skepticism. At the head of the table sat Tobias Rourke, the interim CEO. He was a bulldog of a man, thick-necked and red-faced. "Ms. Mitchell," Tobias said, not bothering to stand up. "This is unexpected. We were under the impression Evelyn would leave the trust to a charitable foundation, not an estranged granddaughter with 0 corporate experience." Clara stood at the foot of the table. She didn't sit. She placed her hands flat on the cold wood and leaned forward. "And I was under the impression that the Caldwell Trust saw a 4% decline in quarterly revenue under your leadership, Mr. Rourke," Clara said, her voice steady. She had memorized page 42 of the file. The room went silent. "That was a market correction," Tobias sputtered, his face reddening. "That was negligence," Clara corrected him. "I saw the portfolio. You're over-invested in commercial retail malls in the Midwest. Malls are dying. My grandmother knew that. Why don't you?" She walked slowly down the length of the table, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. "You think I'm a waitress," Clara said, looking each board member in the eye. "You think I'm uneducated trash who got lucky.